If your websites conduct transactions or collect sensitive data, you have a material risk on your hands that could cost millions. The client-side security gap is being exploited daily with attacks like digital skimming, credential harvesting, and form jacking. 98% of sites use first and third-party JavaScript to power and enhance the user experience, opening up the client side to the adversary. Unlike most things in security, there is an easy fix. Start by understanding your risk. Let Source Defense give you a site-wide risk report this week. Visit securityweekly.com/source defense. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. If you'd like to suggest a guest or topic that you'd like us to cover on one of the upcoming shows, submit your suggestions for a guest by visiting securityweekly.com/guests. There's a form there. You can fill it out and make your suggestion. I do encourage our audience to do that. I haven't seen many topic suggestions, so if there's stuff that you really want to hear us and or our guests talk about, please do that. I mean, we review those. I mean, it says monthly. I mean, we're almost on a weekly basis. We're having a pretty in-depth discussion about guests and topics here on the show. And we want to hear from you, the listeners. So make sure you do that. securityweekly.com/guests. We've also got webinars coming up. Our webinars are free community-based webinars. We are branding them under Security Weekly Unlocked umbrella. The next one coming up is April 14th. Free and open source wireless IDS with Enzyme. Leonard, Larry Pesce, and myself will be on there. Leonard is the author of Enzyme and also the CTO over at Graylog. And so we'll be talking about wireless intrusion detection on April 14th. Again, these are free Security Weekly Unlocked community-based webinars. We only ask for your name and email address, and we don't share that with anyone. We just used to send you stuff after the webinar. Any other webinars out there? Is there more? Or is that... Oh, yeah. Alan Stakalakis. I call him Stakalakis because I just think it sounds good. That's probably not how you pronounce it. But Alan Stakalakis, Tyler Robinson, and myself on April 21st, gaining visibility into your enterprise with Sysmon is available as well. You can go to securityweekly.com/webcasts, find out about all the upcoming webcasts, and we're working on the website actually so that when you go to securityweekly.com/webcasts, you see all the free ones that we've been doing that are upcoming, and you see the entire archive. And actually, I have an archive of all our previous webcasts that we're working on getting it all in one place. So keep checking back. securityweekly.com/webcast will be the place to visit for all things webcasts at Security Weekly. We got a lot of great stories. I'm excited about the stories for this week.
Yeah.
It's a really good mix. Lee and I, we had some stories in common. I guess we should probably start with the most obvious ones. The Lapsus group basically breached Okta and Microsoft. A lot is being written. A lot is being said on podcasts. All the news outlets are picking up on this, all with their like little tidbits of information. So hopefully we can summarize some of that stuff here. I think I'll start with Microsoft, I suppose. Mm-hmm. It seemed like source code was the thing they were after with Microsoft, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go after just source code.
Lapsus. Yeah, this stuff is... I'm not even going there. Oh, you want to start with Microsoft or Okta?
I want to start with Microsoft. We can talk a little about Lapsus. From what I understand, everyone wants to point fingers at Russians hacking everyone, and especially hacking the U.S., which I'm not discounting, by the way. Of course, Russians are pretty much always trying to hack the U.S. in some capacity, maybe ramping up efforts now based on sanctions. But the Lapsus group has ties to what? But Bolivia, Colombia, Latin America. They're not a Russian-based group, from what I understand and have kind of gleaned.
I did not know that.
Yeah, again, I gleaned tidbits from articles and other podcasts. Risky Business, Patrick Gray did a good job of covering it on my way in. I was listening to that this morning. And yeah, Lapsus points not Russia, basically.
I would have expected Brazil. They have one of the most advanced hacking scenes in Latin America.
Yeah, it is Brazil. Yes.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Brazil has just an incredible amount of very sophisticated cyber criminals and a very, very high-end tech scene.
Is that because they don't get jobs in Brazil, so they turn to crime much like the Eastern Bloc countries? Is that true?
I think they've got a really good technical college scene, very good education system.
Yeah, but you got to get a job.
Skilled,
you got to get a job.
Technical group.
And if there's no legit job, you're going to work in the criminal underground job, which, as we learned last week, in a lot of these groups, I believe, based out of Russia, like some people didn't even know they were working for a criminal organization. They were like, "Oh, I'm applying to be a software developer. Like, this is cool," and they get in and they're like, "Wait, I'm writing malware and C2 communications and ransomware."
Wait, no. This goes back to our previous discussion. Look. Software is Legoed together, right?
Yeah.
So if you tell a software developer, hey, I need you to write a library that's going to do X, Y, and Z.
I need you to write a library that's going to read the file system and encrypt everyone's files. Like for protection. Yeah, let's just go with protection.
It just engages the encrypt library so that we're going to do this as a we're building a new full disk encryption system.
And how do we build an awesome library to do that? I'd be like, you know what? I'm all over that. Like, hey, let me break out my programming skills and do the best I can at writing that library. Like, that sounds fun. And then you realize it's included in ransomware. And you're like, oh,
No, how do you know that?
And how do you know?
How do you know that? Because if you're writing a module and Lee's writing a module and I'm writing a module and Johnny's writing a module and Gus is writing a module and Dave's writing a module, and none of our modules are anything horrible. They're simply modules to do a specific thing.
What do you do when it's all together?
And then somebody else who's actually understands the evil, shall we say, glues them all together and integrates them. That's the only person that may know what we've built collectively.
Right. No, that's a good point. But with Lapsus going after Microsoft, like if it were me and I was in I'm just, of course, hypothetically speaking, right? But if you gain a foothold into Microsoft, there's some juicy targets there. The source code, like stealing it, is not on the tops of my list if I'm an evil attacker. Like let me try and take a crack at the update servers. However, the update servers are probably more well protected than the source code. Like, I don't think Microsoft losing a good portion of its source code is a big deal, right? Like certain parts of Microsoft's code, such as the code that implements the update servers, probably pretty important, right? But the source code itself, okay, but again, the update servers, the certificates, the validation processes in Azure, and core components within the operating system, the update servers, DNS, like implanting backdoors, modifying or changing that code, that could be disastrous. My guess is there's so many safeguards, Lee, right, that it makes that task very difficult.
I don't think these guys are looking to modify and re-update. Their MO seems to be find weaknesses in accounts or account processes, so that having the source code to the stuff underneath it is highly attractive. And then they leak the hell out. They don't ransomware system. They just steal your data and leak it out and sell it to the highest bidder. So I'm thinking this is all about finding ways through the Microsoft defenses, because now they got the source code for their stuff.
And I really hope the Microsoft employee or set of employees whose credentials were leaked, like I hope they don't feel bad. You know what I mean? Like,
dude,
imagine being
bad.
But imagine being that person at Microsoft, and it was your account that they traced back to this breach that is now making national headlines, global headlines, if you will. I don't
talk about wanting to hide under a rock.
I don't want to be that person, but I hope that person's not coming under scrutiny at Microsoft, right? Like, because think about how many people work at Microsoft. It could be any one of those, right? Like, you just happen to be the unlucky one that happened to, and I hope that those people or that person aren't being like personally attacked or blamed.
Wait. There's a problem here. Lapsus apparently has a tactic of publicly going, hey, we want to break into Microsoft. If you let us in by losing your account, and for those on audio only, I'm doing big air quotes here.
That's different.
But they have a history of saying, hey, we'd love to get into, name a company. If you work there or have access to there and can lose your account, we might be able to remunerate you a little bit.
Yeah, that's different. That's inexcusable.
Now, those people should be ashamed.
They should. For the most part, I do have to say, all of the Microsoft employees I know and have spoken with have been there for a really long time and a really part of the culture, part of the mission, and like all about Microsoft, and have my utmost respect. It would not fall in that category. However, when you employ, how many people does Microsoft employ, right? That's a question to your whatever assistant that you're using, right? How many people does Microsoft employ? Over 100,000, you think?
Oh God, easily.
Easily, right? Yeah. So there's always, in that large of a data set, right? There's bound. We tend to think. I had this conversation with my wife, which I think is funny.
182,000 according to Google.
So my wife goes, the kids tend to get sick always during the weekday, never on the weekend. And I said, you know why, sweetie? And she's like, oh no.
School?
And no, she's like, I'm like, there's 5 weekdays and only 2 weekend days. So statistically, they're more likely to get sick just because there's 5 versus 2. And she just looks at me and rolls her eyes. And I'm like, you're married to like a computer nerd. This is what? And she's like, I know. And I regret it every day.
40% of the time, people get sick on either a Monday or a Friday.
That's right. See? John's right. That's just the way we think, right? So out of 182,000 employees, you're bound to find one that's willing to trade a bag of cash or whatever, or some Bitcoin transfer or cryptocurrency transfer in exchange for their account. And unfortunately, one is all it takes to get access to source code, right? I mean, to go deeper, you're going to need a lot more skills and bags of tricks in your arsenal. But yeah, interesting. I feel like it wasn't as damaging for Microsoft as it was Okta. Is that true?
Yeah.
I think Okta, okay, everybody expects Microsoft to eventually have a breach here or there. It's been breached how many times over the years?
Yeah.
So
that doesn't mean they don't pay attention to it. I mean, some of the smartest people in our field are not just product security, but like security for Microsoft is a huge deal. Awesome.
Oh yeah. And they've upped their security. And I mean, look, Defender is actually a legit anti-malware product now that people actually rely on, and it's very good. And the security around their source code is a lot better than it used to be. And there's a lot of things going on there. But I mean, with Okta, it's like, wait a minute, they're securing all of my stuff, and what is it? The current release is that 2.5% of their customers, of 15,000 customers, what's the math on that, may have been affected by this breach. And that's a problem for Okta.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, there is a webcast that's been going on for about half an hour now that's talking about that issue. They held it twice today. Earlier today and then now.
I feel like their communications are kind of so-so on the issue as well. They're kind of.
I think their crisis communications suck.
Yeah,
they really should have come right out. Either we don't know yet, we're working on it, or here's what we know, rather than no, everybody's fine, because they had to go back later and go, oh yeah, 2.5%. Yeah, sorry guys.
That makes you look bad. To your point, Josh. During, I think, communications in a breach crisis, as I'll, kind of deem it, you got to tell everyone what you know and what you don't know. And you got to be fully transparent about that. You don't necessarily have to give a whole ton of details either, because I get it if there's an active investigation, but you got to be forthcoming about what you do know and what you don't know. And if you are, you get respect. You're like, oh, okay, you're being transparent and you give updates. And again, you don't have to give all the juicy details, especially right at the beginning. Now, there is a certain period of time that goes by where we appreciate where you do release some more of the details. Basically, statute of limitations, right? Okay, we can release the details now. And I think we all sit here and, we all live in glass houses, right? So we know, like, shit's going to happen, dude. Like, we get it, right? But just be transparent. Lee. Did you have comments? I feel like I keep talking over you. I'm sorry.
So, my first take when I was reading the Okta breach is I thought, is this like the RSA breach when they got all the seeds for the RSA tokens? And then I thought, no, it doesn't work that way. And so that's why I was that's why I'm honing in on they wanted the source to their stuff. They didn't, or they're trying to find out their user base, but then they would have to have some clues on how to exploit weaknesses in the Okta processes. But to be honest, I think Josh's comment about, give me your password or finding an abandoned account or something that's not MFA'd properly or that fails open instead of closed, that's, I think, their real MO here.
It's more to make these companies look bad, sounds like, more than maybe make some money at it, but make them look bad seems to be on their agenda.
Well, I mean, doesn't making a company look bad make you money if you buy or short the stock appropriately?
That's an interesting game. That's an interesting game to play, Josh.
Well, I mean, if you leak, if you break into Okta and do this, don't you think their stock's going to tank after a few minutes?
Yeah.
And so if you shorted the stock, I mean, oops.
To short that stock, though, you'd have to... Can you be just an individual and short a stock, or do you need to be like a brokerage firm? You can't, as an individual. A put. Yeah, okay. I gotcha.
Yeah.
I got
you can totally
so
do
anyone
that as
could short a stock.
Accredited investor. You have to have a certain amount of money to do it.
I gotcha. Okay. So there's some...
Actually, that's not true anymore. With Robinhood and all these other brokerage firms, you can do it very cheaply these days.
Now, let's not give attackers any idea, but it is an interesting way to make money.
Oh, no, they've already had this idea. They've been doing this for years now.
So they've already been doing it.
Oh, God, yeah.
I was going to say, to prove it, you could probably... I mean, it's publicly traded stocks. So
exactly.
You can figure it out.
I can track all of the publicly traded stocks, and you can see, hey, this guy's got a pattern. This person has a pattern of shorting this stock on such and such a date. Okay, that's fine. No big deal. But if all of a sudden you get a new player who shorts a certain stock, and that stock, because of a press release, we've been hacked, we've got a problem, we've been breached, whatever, and their stock goes and implodes. And so this person makes, a few $100,000, $1 million, or whatever. I mean, has nobody done the analysis on this?
That's interesting. That's a good question.
I think. I mean, and there's examples. I mean, look at what's happened when some of those guys have done their SEC filing and then said, "Oh, and by the way, we had a breach," and by golly, look what happened to their stock. Here, you're just intentionally creating it.
Well, I mean, has nobody done an analysis to see if somebody is deliberately profiting on this? Because if not, God, let's talk.
Yeah.
This could be fun to analyze.
If anyone's done that or knows people that are doing that level of analysis, we want to have them on the show.
You bet.
And if nobody's done it, Lee, Tyler,
someone,
you want to get together and do that analysis?
Oh, we got to get someone. Yeah. This is an interesting thought. You're working on your professional evil right now,
That is professional evil.
I really like it.
I like it.
I do this all the time. I mean, you've never... Okay. Yeah. Oh, God. Should I not share the rest of the thoughts?
We spoke a little bit about insider threat. And Lee, you and I both had the story about NASA analyzing insider threat, which I thought was interesting. That there was kind of like a public disclosure about what NASA concluded about its risk threat to insider threat, like what threats and risk those pose, which is kind of interesting.
Right. Well, I mean, NASA had these really crazy findings from their IG a couple years back where basically they were saying you're not doing anything to protect your systems. And so they started doing stuff in waves, and they started with the classified, which is your, higher risk systems, which is great. But it sounds like I'm reading them going, well, wait a minute. Did you guys forget to do the unclassified, or you don't have the resources? What the hell happened? Did you stop? But yeah, insider threat isn't new in the government space, but I'm surprised NASA has gotten all the pressure. Although one big thing about NASA, they're a pure science. They got a lot of partners all over the world. Some of which may or may not have our best interests at heart, but they are advancing science.
Yeah, it's interesting from an espionage perspective, right? But also the difference between like classified, unclassified. How difficult is it to bridge that gap? And I'm sure it depends on the agency and the setup and even the departments within that agency as to how easy or difficult it is to go, yeah, we're paying attention to insider threat in our classified networks, but not the unclassified ones. Well, how easy or difficult is it to make that leap? That was a question for you, Lee.
Say that again.
How easy or
What?
difficult is it to make the jump from unclassified to classified networks and or data inside of each government agency, facility, right? But then I'm sure that varies by each department in each government facility.
No, they're not. No, it doesn't. NIPRNet and CIPRNet are fully separate and HiSide are separate by regulation. They're physically separate.
Physically separate.
Yes.
Yeah. So they're fully air gap. They're supposed to be. I should be clear on that. They're supposed to be fully air gapped from each other. So they are physically separate networks. I mean, Lee, am I wrong?
No, you are not wrong. Except for right now, there's a lot of focus in the federal space on what they're calling cross-domain policy, or where you have one-way links and the like, or there's actually some two-way links, but they are incredibly rare and incredibly hard to get right or approved even. So yeah, there's a functional air gap, and in fact, where classified is traveling over shared lines, it's got NSA encryptors on it, which are non-trivial.
Type 1 encryptors and stuff, they keep separation really seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And there's three networks. There's non-classified, secret, and then top secret, HiSide, right?
Right. Well, don't forget confidential.
Is that a separate
confidential
network?
Is the lowest level of classified.
Is that a separate network?
Yeah, that's separate from unclassified, right?
Oh, yeah. CRD might not be on the high side, but it is one of the classified. It depends on what level. And then once you have the classification level, you also have to have the data sensitivity. Is it national security information? Is it restricted data? Is it formally restricted data? Then there's some weird classifications like classified foreign government information, which is not classified in the U.S., but is protected as if it's classified, or maybe just sensitive unclassified. That's called CFIGI mod.
I mean, is it the U.S. government has done a really good job of data classification, or at least providing the framework for data classification?
Yeah.
Whereas,
there's a hell of a framework.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It's a lot better than most commercial businesses.
That was my point, Josh. Yeah, and that, okay. I want to move on to I want to start with the Russian and Ukraine aspect kind of stories. One that I thought was actually this was disturbing. This was disturbing. And so I also think this is where the Wild West gets messy. So Anonymous has called for a total boycott of Nestle products after the Swiss food conglomerate continued to supply essential goods to Russia, despite, obviously, the article quotes, mounting pressure from competitors to cut ties. In response to intense public pressure to cut ties with Russia in protest of the military assault on Ukraine, more than 400 multinational corporations have, announced some kind of exit or partial or full from the country. Nestle announced earlier this month that it will suspend all exports of its products from Russia except for essential items such as baby formula. So Anonymous is like, you got to kill the babies. Like what?
No, stop.
I mean, that's a stretch. That's a stretch, right? But there's two sides. But also, I mean, you got to see do you make that? Do you not supply some of those essentials to Russian people that, are they just the victims in this? This is my point, is that sanctions and or unsanctioned hacks, which we've kind of warned against, will just disrupt daily life for Russian people and just punish them. This is a difficult issue. This isn't a 0 or 1.
Okay, so let's talk about this for a second. Now, by the way, I should mention that tomorrow morning, for us in the U.S., I'm actually presenting at Sci-Hub Armenia about cyber warfare.
Oh.
So it'll be 4 p.m. Yerevan time.
Nice.
So, yeah, I'm really excited. This is so much fun. Tyler's a member there, and several people are members there.
I have a call with the director, Marie, tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm talking with her at 8 o'clock in the morning.
My last name is indicative that I am involved with Psyop Armenia as well. Support them.
Well, my wife is Armenian, and so we're hoping to go actually visit and go to a conference and speak later this year or next year. And so my father-in-law is teaching my daughter Armenian.
Yeah, we should all go out together.
I'd love that.
I need to visit my homeland. I do.
I would love that very much. We're all we're taking my in-laws with us. My father-in-law is teaching my daughter Armenian to get ready for this trip.
Oh, like it's awesome.
Which is children should be bilingual.
Yes, agreed.
But anyway, so the Russia-Ukrainian war is fascinating for this because of various things. I mean, you talked about the boycott, and obviously there's the cyber warfare aspect, but how about the data sovereignty issues? Like, for example, you understand that if you withdraw from Russia, you lose all your data about Russia. Customer data, everything. It has to be deleted.
How do you get rid of all of your data?
No, not the how. The how they don't care about, but you have to get rid of it. There's a law in Russia that any data you collect in Russia must be finalized before you send a copy of it outside the borders of Russia to have analysis done. So if you need to do analysis of your Russian data, you can do it. You need to do it in your AWS cloud in Colorado, whatever. I don't care. Or Virginia for US East, blah, blah, blah. You can do that, but you have to finalize the data in Russia and hold it in a Russian data center and then send a copy of the finalized data out to be analyzed, right? If you withdraw from Russia and withdraw your data from Russia, delete your data in Russia, does that mean you have to delete all the data you sent out for analysis because you no longer have a copy in Russia? Do we then lose medical, scientific, customer, business, all that kind of data? There are aspects of this that people aren't thinking about.
Agreed.
And it's fascinating.
Agreed.
So now you've got cyber warfare. Okay, so let's talk cyber warfare. I'm sorry, This is fun. So forgive me.
Well, just with the Nestle example was interesting because, like, do you need to stop everything? Like, and if you don't, then Anonymous is like, well, we're going to go hack you. Like, there's repercussions on either side of it. Like, this is not an easy decision.
I think that if you said, hey, Anonymous, we're going to keep manufacturing or shipping baby formula, humanitarian items,
right,
that are blatantly humanitarian. If you're like, we're sending chocolate bars.
Yeah, right.
That's not humanitarian.
No.
But if you say we're shipping baby formula or medicines or things like that, I don't think anybody's going to complain.
Right.
Okay. And if they do, come on, get a life.
Yeah, but this is where the unregulated vigilantism can sometimes go right, and I agree with. And sometimes but wait, this is a much deeper issue, right, that we're dealing with.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, admittedly, if your baby formula can be used to make explosives, I don't know. I'm making this up as I go along.
But that's maybe not in that example, but in other examples, sure, you could take those humanitarian goods that are dual or multi-purpose, right?
That's the problem. So if they're dual or multi-purpose, like you put it well said, by the way, thank you. That's a problem. Yeah. But if it's honestly humanitarian aid, let's be humans about this, everybody. Okay.
Yeah.
On the other hand, the cyber warfare. We just had the White House notification. Was it Monday? That Tuesday? Yeah. I forget. I'm sorry.
Tuesday.
That
Monday.
Monday. Thank you. Prepare for cyber warfare, especially if you read the briefing notes, especially in the water and power industry. And if you remember. Do you remember the TeamViewer incident where they were raising the level of hydroxide in the water?
But like, if we're not prepared for that now, we're screwed.
We're not prepared for that now. We are screwed.
So we're screwed.
Most water and power facilities are low staff in the security world, low budget, low everything.
I'll disagree with you there, Josh. I think there's a huge difference between power and water and other industries, maybe oil and gas, perhaps, right? But there's a difference in their cybersecurity maturity. I think power, out of all of them, is the most mature. In my experience, talking with people, I think
I'm totally going to tell you you're wrong.
No,
do you know why?
They've had NERC-SIP for a while. They've got
Yes.
vested
And do you know
interest?
what?
Yes,
They can barely do NERC SIP.
Yeah.
Okay, seriously. I'll explain this in a give me 2 sentences or 5 sentences, whatever. Give me a couple paragraphs.
Do it.
The reason that power and water are less mature than oil and gas is because oil and gas are run as a for-profit enterprise. Power and water are run as utilities. And as utilities, they have a very limited amount of money that they can get for profit.
But the power
They're limited
utility,
by legislation.
the power utility is more resilient by definition and implementation than perhaps water.
What do you mean?
Maybe
Sorry,
gas.
explain.
There's a lot more contingencies, backups. It's a grid. Like we literally refer to it as the power grid, right? Which means there's less single points of failure in our nation's power than perhaps water, than perhaps gas.
Leaving out Texas, but
Sure. But those were problems they knew about for a long time. I mean, I'm not saying they were right, wrong, or indifferent, right? But those are not necessarily cybersecurity issues that they knew about, right? But those were infrastructure issues that were well known. They decided not to address them, much like we decide not to address cybersecurity issues. And
agreed.
Isolated to one particular region of the country.
Agreed. And there are, by the way, power generation companies. And so let's clarify, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
There
there's
are
tons
power
of commercial,
generation companies that are very, very secure, have lots of budget for cybersecurity, do a great job, et cetera.
There's companies that do the billing and the routing separate from the delivery. Yeah, you're right. Saying power is one industry. There's certainly... And I'm not the world's most foremost. Like those of you that work in industrial control systems, right? You might be jumping out of your chair. We're generalizing here, right? At a very, very high level, we understand that there are folks in our community and outside our community that are working in this area that are in tune with the finer details. We'd love to hear from you and love to have you on the show. And right now, we're overgeneralizing for the sake of debate and conversation.
So, I mean, go ahead, Lee.
So I was going to say, I mean, part of the problem is with a lot of our critical infrastructure, we have these small companies that, they don't have the internal resources to really do all the cyber things. And we also get little utilities where you'll get what looks like a snake oil salesman saying, we'll take care of all your stuff. We got a cloud solution. They can spell security if you spot them, the ETURITY. But that's why I was trying to say size matters. If you've got to have some consistent execution. And CISA and some of the other ISACs are really working to help bolster these guys, get them tools and information.
I think they're taking priority in that structurally, for sure, as they should. Yeah. Well, and as the advisory came down, from the White House, that they're going to be under even more attack, right?
But so the problem is we're talking about utilities, power, water, that kind of thing, and which are critical infrastructure. Let's be clear; they're one of the 16 categories of critical infrastructure. And by the way, hey Gauss and DMZ, go enjoy fish tacos. And hey, Wolfgang's on. That's so cool. Okay, Discord is hopping, by the way. If anybody wants to be on Discord, hint, be on Discord. You should join the Discord. It's actually
securityweekly.com/Discord. That is how you sign up. So yeah, carry on.
But the point is that power and water as utilities, some of them are fantastic. Many of them are not. And so how effective are they going to be at protecting against a cyber attack? They're just simply not. Now, if you amplify that against the rest of the world, because Russia is not just pissed off at the U.S.
They're pissed off
at a lot of people.
Yeah.
And when you take into account the effect that they're, from what I understand, and I could be very, very way off, I have heard rumors that they're nationalizing their ransomware gangs. So putting them together. Now, when you
we've speculated that, Josh. I don't know that we have concrete evidence.
Any hard evidence.
Yeah, any hard evidence, but it would make sense, right? But I also think they're following suit where North Korea and perhaps China has also nationalized their. Let's just say that's a fact, right? Like everything we've read and know that North Korea and China basically already are in doing that. not even going in that direction. They're already doing that. And Russia is really just now following suit.
Right. So assume that Russia doesn't even nationalize them, but just sticks them all in a big room together and says, look, come up with some ransomware and make us some damn money.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you imagine if they could take all of the ransomware strains, put them all together and make like sort of, I'm not going to call it super ransomware, but make it a very effective multi-role ransomware and then spew
like
that out to the world?
In a communist society, right? Isn't there there's like a cow analogy to the different political systems, like socialism, communism, capitalism. But if you did that in ransomware, like in capitalism, you get to keep 100% maybe of your criminal profits in ransomware. In a communist society, like what percentage you think you're keeping versus the government? Is it an 80-20 split? 80's going to the government, you keep 20, or 100% in a socialist environment? There's an analogy here that you could translate or change from cows to ransomware proceeds.
Well, I certainly hope that they decide. I mean, I'm sort of serious here. I hope that what they decide to do is simply to go, look, if you get us enough money, we won't feed a bullet into the back of your skull.
Well, there's that
because that
too.
would incentivize them the least.
Yes.
I mean, it incentivizes them.
I'm also not the world's most foremost expert in political science either, and so if you want to pick apart, my analogy to cows like that, I don't think that's like the social media explanation of political systems and governmental systems, right? Certainly, there's way more details than like an infographic or an image that has a joke on it about cows and communism versus socialism versus capitalism, right? There's a lot more there to it as well. But to your point, Josh, right? I think that's kind of a dangerous thing to think about how more countries, in addition to North Korea and China, are nationalizing their cyber criminal activities. That's the interesting point there in my mind.
Well, they're international, untraceable money.
Yeah, cryptocurrency
generators.
Yeah, ransomware and cryptocurrency, man. Like that's a lot of money to be made there.
So cyber warfare, much like, and I apologize, Lee, give me 1 second and I'll shut up and let you talk. Cyber warfare on the criminal side, much like the 21st century version of warfare, is all about economics. With all the companies withdrawing, pulling SWIFT out of Russia, it's an economic war.
Yeah.
And what is the criminal cyber warfare? It's all about the economics of warfare. It's fascinating. So I'll shut up. Lee, please go ahead.
And what I was going to say is that one of the interesting things that's in one of my stories, I don't want to vector us, but the Exotic Lily gang that sells existing access. In other words, if Conti has blown somebody's system open, Exotic Lily goes and markets that to other
They're
cyber
like an
gangs.
access broker is typically how we see that termed. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, holy crap, more money. Or it just, they're working on this. And there was another one, I'm trying to remember what story it was. Their ransomware is a service gang that does like, you're a subscriber to their service, and they'll negotiate the payments. They take Monero, or if you want Bitcoin, they'll charge an extra 25% to the victim. They're doing all this stuff up front. You're totally, behind their proxy, and they're of course getting a nice cut. But it's almost like having a professional services provider in front of your, that you've hired to do your ransomware. Holy crap!
I listen to a lot of podcasts. I read a lot. Obviously, we cover it on the show every week, right? And sometimes certain things stick out in my mind. And along these lines of the different access brokers, if you will, different components of cyber criminal activities, Darknet Diaries, episode 112, Dirty Comms. Great episode. What I thought was fascinating was if you want to steal the contents of someone's cryptocurrency wallet, right? I think we as hackers and security professionals, we typically think of like, we're going to do it all on our own as part of myself or like part of the same team, right? And I think that's because of our red team and pen test methodology and mentality is that company X hires us and we do everything to test and break into that company. In the cyber criminal realm, as we've established on the show, and you can listen to a lot of resources that talk about this, it's highly compartmentalized. And episode 112 Dirty Comms talks about if you want to steal a cryptocurrency wallet, you got one person that's going to steal the credentials to that person's crypto wallet. They're going to steal the credentials to their email, and that's all you got. Everything else is going to be outsourced. I'm going to outsource the SIM swapping to two different people. One person is going to steal the tablet from the mobile provider, the manager's tablet in the store. And they calculate they got about 10 minutes because like mobile providers have gotten wise to SIM swapping attacks and they're working really hard to prevent them. But if I walk into a store and I steal that manager's tablet, they estimate they got about 10 minutes before they realize that tablet's missing and they turn it off. Within that 10 minutes, I'm SIM swapping for the person who's holding the creds to the crypto wallet in the email to SIM swap for that second factor to get access to their crypto wallet. However, I'm not holding the phone that they're SIM swapping to because I don't want to be holding of that much information. Could be incriminating. You got a holder. The holder's holding the phone. So here's what happens in that 10 minutes. I'm logged in the person's email. I know how to log into their cryptocurrency wallet, but I need the second factor. Oh, SIM swap person, here's some money. SIM swap to this number. Holder, when you get that text message, you relay it back to me. I log in. I'm in the cryptocurrency wallet, and then I transfer all the funds out. And there's different ways to transfer it out to get around limitations and whatnot, right? But that's how that particular scheme is working. If I got anything wrong, I apologize, and you should go listen to episode 112 of Jack Rosider's Darknet Diaries called Dirty Comms. He interviews someone who played in those circles and did all of that and explains it in even more detail, which I thought was pretty fascinating, right? And speaking to what we're talking about now and all the different criminal groups that are doing small parts of these particular hacks, if you will, right?
This is fascinating.
Isn't it, though? I was like, that's really interesting. And Jack Rosider, he loses it. He breaks down into laughter because a lot of the folks doing these cryptocurrency steals, if you will, are like teenagers. He's like, so like what happens if like the holder in the example, his parents are calling him to dinner, right? Or he's got to go to CCD or something, like, and can't take his phone or her phone, like.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
So like your whole thing, but now these people are making in this 10 minutes. The person he interviewed said they can make $100,000 in 10 minutes. Not just stealing the wallet, but all they're doing, they're the person that took the risk to go steal the tablet, the manager's tablet from T-Mobile or AT&T or whatever, right? Craziness.
So
great,
I
great
think,
episode.
you know, you've and by the way, we've got some great stuff in the Discord. Lee, actually, critical infrastructure disruption. That's a fantastic term. And then Wolfgang came up with, you know, info warfare marketing experts, because marketing people are going to be needed to create information campaigns, because economics, PR, and propaganda are all about what cyber warfare is these days. This is really cool. I'm blown away by how interesting this is. And then I'm sorry, I know we're talking about cyber warfare too much, but like, can I just one more point,
and then I want to move on to firmware.
Okay. When is it an act of war? When you send them the drones that we were talking about last week, or when you put people's boots on ground?
I think it's physical war versus. I think cyber war happens all the time. Like it's a constant, right? It's a continuous cycle of cyber. And war is probably the wrong term for it, because when we think of war in a traditional sense, we think of a series of battles that have a distinct start and end. Cyber conflict, and you guys are coming to all new terms in the Discord, which I really love, right? But this constant series of cyber battles, right, happens all the time. Right. You don't need boots on ground, right? Like these attacks are happening all the time. And that's what I think the major difference is between physical war. So along these lines, there is another story we can cover on this. I do want to get to firmware though, because we've got a couple of stories on there, and make sure we hit the browser one, because that's important too. But there was an article about why we haven't seen debilitating cyber war in Ukraine. Basically, I disagree with all this speculation. So Here are the 3 points in this article why we haven't seen debilitating cyber war in Ukraine. One was that Russian hackers are not nimble enough to compromise Ukrainian targets during the invasion. I think that's false. I mean, NotPetya is a perfect example of that, and probably lots of other ones. Second was that stealthy cyber attacks aren't that useful when compared to the damage that Russian troops are doing with missiles and bombs. I think they support each other. I mean, unfortunately in this case, but there's a history in modern combat and warfare of combining both cyber attacks with physical attacks. A lot of people aren't at liberty to talk about the details there, but absolutely you can go back in the past 20 years and pull several examples of all countries using a combination of both cyber attacks and physical attacks, right?
But no. Only in small scale. Only in when I'm going to go take over a village, I'm going to go take over a laboratory, I'm going to go take over, I'm going to attack this small piece of land or this facility. But when you start talking about entire countries, the last time we really war gamed those was in a European country, was with the internet connected IoT technologies able to do full on IoT cyber warfare was the 1970s, the 1980s, the Cold War. So this is
you're right. Because if you go back in history, Josh, to your point, smaller number of computers controlled much larger swaths of infrastructure and or weapons. True, I agree. Today, it's a lot more targeted. Both the weapons, the damage, and cyber attacks, right, are more strategic and pointed attacks. Agreed.
More tactical attacks you're talking about.
Tactical.
Yeah, I mean, the attacks we think of today are the attacks where we send in a squad, a platoon, a short company, not where we're sending in brigades.
Agreed. Agreed. The scale.
That kind of mass scale is so different from what we've been doing for the last, 30 years?
No, it's a great counterpoint in that a scaled physical attack with missile and bombs can enact much more damage than targeted either cyber or physical attacks or some combination of them. That's a good point. Unfortunately,
I think there's
in this case, it's terrible.
Lee,
you're Cyloning again.
You're Cyloning again. But Wolfgang had a great point in Discord again. Wolfgang, by the way, is awesome. They have poor communications due to the tactics. They damage cellular communication enough so they can't actually engage ground troops with info warfare. That's in Ukraine currently.
Yes, correct. It definitely has that relationship. They also say, thirdly, Russian hackers are too busy protecting their own digital infrastructure.
Well, there's a lot of people gunning for them, man.
Be. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It would be my answer to that. If it were me, it would be a balance between offense and defense, as we can kind of theorize and put into use and model out. But resources are finite as well.
Yep. Well, is this any better?
Yes.
Am I still siloning? So my thinking was on the defending their infrastructure. I think it's two different teams, just like you talked about, having the hackers specialty. The attackers aren't the defenders. It's two different
teams.
So
yeah,
I don't think they're mutually exclusive activities. Your people are coming after them. They're defending their backsides, but I don't think that's slowing down their attack activity.
Well, certainly the defenders in this case, my story number 4, I realized there's another story on this. Anonymous is hacking unsecured printers in putting, war, propaganda on these messages, right? Basically, informing the Russian people how to use Tor to get around the blocks to get the real information, essentially. But the printers are misconfigured, manually forwarded on the Russian routers, and the ports were deliberately forwarded. In other words, like, there's printers on the internet. Like, why? the analysis of the war and or cyber war between Russia and Ukraine aside, I'm not downplaying that in any stretch of the imagination. However, I want to pivot slightly into like, why are people exposing printers to the internet? Like deliberately is what the article is kind of pointing. Like this was a deliberate action. Like you're forwarding these ports through your router. You're not just plugging in your printer and putting it on the internet. Like you're deliberately exposing this printer to the internet. I don't understand why. I don't get it.
Right. Well, I mean, wasn't there a ransomware version that would like print the ransomware node on all the printers in your network at whatever every couple hours?
Yes. We covered that story.
And I agree with what the hell is the printer doing internet accessible? Hello. What could possibly go wrong?
Yet it happens. I mean, you can go to Showdan at any time and pull it. Josh, you change your background.
I had to. I saw this the other day. I thought it was great. So I will dump out of the way. But it's about the tractor pulling the tank.
Yes.
Came and took it.
Yep. I do want to pivot to firmware security, a topic that's near and dear to my heart, also overlapping with my current research project in emulating some firmware. I do want to point out one of the resources I found. He speaks with a really thick Italian accent, and it was so thick that I almost like didn't pick up that it was an Italian accent until I kind of dug into it a little more. But then as I was watching some of his YouTube videos, I realized he let YouTube transcribe all of his videos. So if you're having trouble, following along with a highly technical content, in addition to using your brain to interpret English through a thicker accent, the subtitles are there. And I'm like, oh, now once I watch it with subtitles, I'm like, this is great. He's absolutely fantastic series of videos. The channel is called Make Me Hack on YouTube. Valerio Di Gianpietro is the individual behind these videos, and he talks about basically picking apart firmware, emulating firmware, QEMU, JTAG, build root, all kinds of stuff are covered in these videos. Great stuff. Again, overlapping with some of the stuff that I'm working on, hopefully for future and upcoming technical segments here on the show and perhaps webinars. So that's my area, of research. So in the news, my story number 7, boy, does this rabbit hole go deep. UEFI firmware vulnerabilities. This traces back to a 6-year-old vulnerability, a series of vulnerabilities in UEFI firmware. Binarly, I call it binarly. How do you say that? BINARLY. Binarily. Did some research on this one. So they say the majority of enterprise tools available for source code analysis are not suitable to pinpoint firmware-specific defects. That's an interesting statement in and of itself. As I look at firmware, pick it apart, in the fact that it's compiled for different architectures, which are numerous, right? Because you can't just say MIPS. There's a million different, or not a million, probably 30-something different versions of MIPS, different types of processors. Also, the endian matters, right? Like especially when you're doing analysis and debugging and looking for vulnerabilities and exploits, the byte ordering matters if you want to make any of your exploits work, and especially your payloads, shellcode. That byte order matters.
You don't use middle endian? Come on, what's wrong with
right? You? What I thought was interesting is in QEMU has some emulators, and it's MIPS EL, and the joke is that it's little endian, but the acronym is backwards. It's EL instead of LE because it's little endian. Get it?
Oh God! Oh God!
That's why you see
really funny.
MIPS EL. It's a reference to little endian, but the L and the E are flipped. Yeah. This is how
Hey,
deep down the
Paul?
rabbit hole I'm going with some of my research.
You're
Good
a
on you,
geek.
Paul.
Is that a bite order dad joke?
Yes,
They did.
yes,
They
it
made
is.
a bite order dad joke. Like, how awesome is that? Which is great. So one of the most obvious differences is implementation of the memory management functions compared to non-firmware specific software. This leads a false sense of security when no vulnerabilities are detected when you run your source code analysis tools, because you're not understanding the new one. Like firmware, it's special. Each one is a special snowflake. Like I really think this is a case where we can use the snowflake kind of analogy. So most other interesting in this article is that most outsourcing companies developing firmware code for major device vendors do not have product security teams. In other words, I need to adopt this library or this piece of code for my firmware, and it's coming from this other partner that's a small little software development shop that isn't benefiting from having product security teams that larger organizations have, which is why you see larger manufacturers, D-Link, Netgear, etc., have some of these vulnerabilities because they're importing or partnering with firms that are much smaller that don't have product security teams, for example. Also, what I thought was interesting, and it was one thing that Valerio talked about in some of his videos, is that he was analyzing a specific router. I think it was Gemtech was the name of it. And he said, like, let's say they released this router in 2015. However, the router they released in 2015 used a 7-year-old Linux kernel and associated binaries and build root environment. So, like, I was joking earlier on a call with some folks for an upcoming webcast. Like, you literally started with 7 years of technical debt. Like, that's where you started. Like, you didn't even, most of us start with like 0 technical debt, because if you're going to use the latest stuff, you basically got 0 technical debt. They started with 7 years of technical debt and then released the product to market. And if you don't update it, that means 3 years later, you now have 10 years of technical debt because they started with a 7-year-old kernel in build root and binary, busy box environment, dude. Like, 7-year-old kernel and associated libraries and basically GNU utilities and what have you. Crazy, right? Crazy. Because that's what, a partner developed 7 years ago, and it's what works.
Right. It wasn't broken, so they used it. What could possibly go wrong?
Right.
Well, I mean, look, this goes right back to what we were talking about in our earlier segment. It works. What's the problem? Yeah, but how many iterations have you gone through that you haven't updated your libraries, and your Legos are still the ones with whatever it is, bisphenol A in them, and I don't even know if they suffer from BPA, but I mean, like what the hell? 7 years old since the last time we updated all those internal libraries. Right. Oh, great. By the way, just FYI, nope. This is the Krasuka 4, which is the communications and control infrastructure that the Ukrainians just captured. And Wolfie asked me about it. So I'm like, okay, cool. I'll get a picture of it for you.
So these vulnerabilities in UEFI, or UEFI, right? I'll call it UEFI because it's easier to say. They follow a 6-year-old attack vector. It's in a GitHub repository called Aptiocalypsis, which are 3 0-day vulnerabilities in NVE, SMM, SDIO, SMM, and USB RT drivers from AMI. It's like Dell's just now getting around to patching some of this stuff today. Like, this is kind of how slow this cycle goes when we talk about firmware. And now UEFI vulnerabilities are not stuff that's in weird routers that you buy from China or what have you, right? UEFI's in Dell and HP laptops that you probably have in production today.
Yeah.
Craziness.
I mean, the comment at the end there about basically you don't know how to security check them is annoying. I'm worried it's more true than it should be.
Well, that's why companies like Eclipsium and Binarly exist, right? Is to highlight this. And I'm all about it, man. Like, this is near and dear to my heart, right? Like you go back to 2006, Paul, and that was, I'm like, holy crap, this is bad. And we wrote the book and thought court, like this is a thorn in our side.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This is huge. Like, this is huge. We've been talking about it for weeks, not this specific story.
Yeah.
But it's a great story to explain what we've been talking about for weeks now, and probably years, God knows. But I mean, we have built an edifice, am I pronouncing that right? Of such huge proportions. And, oh God, relevant XKCD. There's an XKCD where it's like, 14,000 boxes piled on top of each other to create this beautiful application. And there's a little thing over here that's holding it up that's, some tiny application maintained as an open source application by 3 guys in Nebraska.
Yes.
And
that's
and
your
we built
that's
up
your bootloader.
What's that?
That's your bootloader. That's your UEFI, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We're standing
And
up all
we're
this fabulous hardware and software on top of this embedded system that, if it is vulnerable, the whole house of cards falls down, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the problem. We're not keeping track of all the pieces of the infrastructure that are required for our, let's just say, enterprise, our company to run, right?
Yeah.
And so for one company, they have how many different pieces of code, infrastructure, firmware, software, hardware, IoT, IIoT, IOMT, whatever you happen to have. Has anybody done for a small, medium, and large enterprise, actually for an SMB and then an SME and then a large enterprise, how many pieces of these things are there? And then how many of them haven't been looked at, touched, dreamed about,
right,
fantasized about, or frightened somebody in God knows how many years?
I generally tend to classify them into 3 different areas, right? Like one area I would put in IoT. Like these are standalone devices, your firewalls, your routers, your switches, your door locks, cameras, all those IoT things have firmware, suffer from numerous problems that we need a whole other segment to go into, right? But one of them in common is this vulnerabilities built into the firmware, right? The bootloader kernel file system applications that are inside of what we call firmware, right? Firmware literally being between software and hardware. So that's IoT. The next set is, I'll put a class of like what we used to call your BIOS in your computers.
Right.
Laptops, desktops, like the system inside of your computer that's responsible for interfacing with the hardware, booting your kernel and operating system, right? So that's what I call it. Today, modern systems use UEFI, Universal Extensible something. I forget what it stands for, right? But it's got a lot more functionality built into it. Then I would further extend that out into a third class that is the firmware that is inside of all your other hardware, your network adapters, your graphics cards, your USB, but all of these subsystems of hardware within your computers also run firmware as well. Now, the one commonality in the second 2 subclasses of firmware is that there is oftentimes, most of the time, bidirectional communication between the operating system and these subsystems, which means malware that gets infected on the operating system can get embedded into these subsystems and vice versa. And that's the attack vector that one of them that keeps me up at night.
Okay. So, God, what was his name? Daniel Trauner from Axonius. Remember that a couple weeks ago?
Yeah.
We need to have him back on and talk about this. We need to get Axonius to sponsor. We need to do a webinar on this because this is awesome. Like, this is a really fascinating topic.
Part of your asset, it's part of asset. It's why companies like Eclipsium, Binarly, like exist, right? Is because
exactly. Oh, we should do a panel with Binarly, Eclipsium, and Axonius, shouldn't we?
Sure.
Oh my God, would that be awesome?
Be awesome.
Can we do a webinar with those guys? Would that would anybody attend that?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, on Discord, if you guys would be interested in us doing a webinar on that, we'll see if we can do it.
I'm biased. This is a passion, of mine, and
same here. I love this.
But I want to also Eclipsium's doing great research in this area as well. Good friends of mine over at Eclipsium, love those guys, and Microtik routers. So I started digging in this article. So now we're in the more IoT. You could almost split IoT into two different categories, right? Like I feel like there's IoT that's responsible for the core access gateway, right? Like your router, firewall, not just in your home but in your business, right? Provides a core function, and several vendors make firmware-based systems that provide that functionality. I think the other class of IoT are all those other devices that are on your network, right? Like your home automation, access points, that are providing wireless, not necessarily the gateway function. I mean, TV, everything has an embedded controller in it today. Like at home, sometimes I enable it, sometimes I don't. Like my stove, it has Wi-Fi capability. I don't why does my stove need to be on the Wi-Fi? Like my Traeger grill needs to be on the Wi-Fi so I can use the smartphone to see what the temperature is and turn it on and off remotely. But all these things are friggin' IoT devices, which is amazing, right? That's one class. Microtik and others I would put in that other class of access gateways. So Microtik is in Eclipsium actually wrote a great article at the end of last year. When honeybees become murder hornets is the title, and I linked to it in the show notes, right? Basically talking about the access vector that is Microtik routers. They're so vulnerable, and so about 2 million of them in estimation on the internet, that Tickbot has adopted it for its command and control infrastructure and incorporated it into its communications. So Tickbot malware has weaponized Microtik routers as proxies for command and control communications. This is the future that I talked about in 2007, that I was like, this is going to be bad. And now that future is the present. And many people haven't heard of Microtik. Oh, so it's based in Latvia. Microtik may not be a household name. I mean, it is to me. Popular supplier of routers and wireless ISP devices since 1996. More than 2 million devices deployed worldwide. I played with these back in the day. I had what it's like my DNS server or something. Great devices. They work really well, but they're kind of vulnerable.
Yeah. Well, one of the cool things that came out of this is that Microsoft released a tool to scan to see if your Microtik router has been,
isn't that crazy?
Tipped, whatever, compromised.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, I'm still getting used to Microsoft releasing cool security tools for free. That's kind of neat.
Right. That's a good thing.
Well, I actually, can I throw something in there? I just talked to them yesterday. I want to give them a kudos, but Comcast is releasing a free security tool today. GitGuard.
No way.
Yeah, Comcast released a free open source security tool today, GitGuard, where it looks through your GitHub repositories for secrets. And actually, the cool thing is, this is the neat thing, it doesn't tell you what the secret is. It puts a remediation ticket in your ticketing system, says the secret is here. You probably want to get, move that out.
Yeah, too bad Samsung couldn't. Samsung could have used that. As we found out in the breach from last week, a lot of secrets in Samsung's code that were leaked last week.
Oops.
Mm-hmm.
Oops. I had a segue from there, though. You talked about Git. Okay. I had a story about Git.
You did. Bugger. Where was it?
Where was it? Oh, I spent time reading this article, too. I think it was.
Was that the HubSpot one?
Yeah. It was my story number 1. How we discovered vulnerabilities in CI/CD pipelines of popular open source products from a company called Cycode. Props to Cycode. You did a great job writing up this article. This is basically command injection in GitHub Actions. It means I can put a commit, I think even a pull request into a GitHub repository that contains a command injection. That command injection they show in this article can be extended to not just run commands on like whatever little instance GitHub might spin up to run this action, but basically gain full control of your GitHub repository, steal your secrets, implant code inside your repository, and the list goes on. And the article is extremely detailed and very well written, and I applaud them for that as well. It's very refreshing. And they do a great job of, if you don't know what GitHub actions are, they do a great job of explaining it. That was really good.
It's actually a really good article, Paul. I got to say thank you. I'm going to be sending this to some people. But did you see one of the platforms that they found massive critical vulnerabilities in?
They list them out. Yes, they disclose.
Wire.
What is Wire?
It's like Signal. Wire, Threema, Signal.
Oh, yeah. And they applied fixes. Yeah, so these repositories of software projects, I should say, there's 3, 6, 7 of them. They found these vulnerable conditions in, and these 7 projects have fixed them. Josh, is what you're saying is that Wire is one of them, and it says it's an open source communication platform. You're saying it's similar to Signal.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people have used Wire over the years. It's not as popular as Signal or Telegram or any of those, but it's wow. That I skipped right over that when I read this article originally, and I just went back and went, oh dear. So anybody that uses Wire, apparently they did not see any exploitation of the prior exploitation of the workflows. But the fact is, it's really interesting that we're seeing once again that it may. I see this all the time in cryptography. You're using a great algorithm. You implemented crap. Okay, yes. Your implementation is crap.
You're using GitHub Actions, but your implementation.
Yeah. If you implement badly, you can inject, you can inject bad code or bad updates or evil grades or what. There's a dozen different places, hundreds of different places that you can inject bad things to happen into a project, into a system, and the implementation of the system is actually normally the easiest, and that's a problem.
I did want to talk about browser inside the browser.
Oh, that was so cool. Yes, please.
This was a great hack. So replicating the entire window design using basic HTML CSS is quite simple. Combine the window design with an iframe pointing to a malicious server hosting the phishing page, and it's basically indistinguishable. So what that means is you plant a button that says sign in with Microsoft. When the user clicks that button, a pop-up comes up and it says, hey, sign in with Microsoft. Now, the top of that window, as we know, if you open up a new browser window, contains what? It contains the URL bar. The URL bar has an indicator for SSL verification. It has the URL and various components, and users are accustomed to visually checking for that, most of us anyway. It all looks great. So you enter your credentials and you click submit. The problem is, and my updates are funny. I'm like, I think the pop-up window is using HTML and CSS and JavaScript, basically displaying an image that represents your URL bar, like a total, like an image, not a new browser window, but an image. So it's basically a freaking HTML image along the top, right? And then I looked in the source code a little more. So like I dug deeper into the story and I like analyzed the source code. It legit is that. So like when the user clicks sign into Microsoft, the pop-up screen comes up and it looks like a new browser window, but it's really just a new window in general. And the very top part is an image. So it looks like a new browser window with a URL that's all verified and blah, blah, blah. But that's just a dynamically generated image in that little pop-up, from what I could tell in a quick glance of the code. Which, I mean, dude, that's pretty creative, right? Like we talk about hackers being really creative. Like that's really creative. Like I don't have to worry about spoofing certificates, DNS spoofing, DNS pinning, like all that stuff. Like, oh, just pop up a new browser window and overlay an image that looks like the URL is legit. Now, if the user tries to interact with that URL bar, things could go sideways. But how many users are going to do that? Oh, I see a pop-up. It's asking for my credentials. I'll sign into Microsoft. The code behind that is not signing into Microsoft. It's stealing your credentials. awesome phishing
I think
attack.
it's going to be fascinating when Dave Kennedy, who's going to be on the recorded session coming up next, rebuilds this into the social engineering toolkit.
Right.
Set.
Yeah. To build. Yeah. I mean, SC Toolkit does that, right? Builds web pages based off, spoofs web pages.
Spoofs web pages. But now, if he builds browser and the browser pieces to it, it'll like that. Oh my God, that'll be beautiful.
Because I was like, how are they getting around like same origin policy and all? I'm like, oh, I didn't care about any of that.
It's just a picture.
It's great.
Thank you with some text boxes. Have a nice day. Thank you for playing.
To say that that is an elegant hack. I mean, elegant might be the wrong word. Like, a lot of hacks we do aren't really elegant, but they work. Right?
Oh, interesting. So Wolfie wants to know, is this different from the VNC in browser attack? And I think it is, isn't it?
I'm not sure.
This is not VNC in browser, Wolfie. This is a picture of a browser window, a login window.
Correct.
With text boxes to let you type your login in.
JavaScript, I believe, creates the window. HTML and CSS, maybe some JavaScript as well, displays what goes inside of that window. And what you put inside of that window makes it look like there's a URL bar at the top, but it's really just an image. The GitHub repo is linked to, not directly, but if you go to the reference link in my show notes, Mr. D0X links to his GitHub repository where he has all the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that he used to do that. So,
yeah,
you can go implement this today, which is awesome.
Oh, I've got how this works. Technical write up. I'll throw it in the Discord.
Yeah, he does a technical write up as well. Lee, any other stories of yours? We both had sorry, I'll pick on one that we both had, bind server.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a while since we've had an issue with bind, but apparently we got the jackpot with, 3 high severity flaws. They're apparently not super disruptive, but I'd still...
Well, I would say they're disruptive.
Not patched.
I would say they're disruptively, but not remotely exploitable in terms of shell. They're disruptive in the sense that I can crash your DNS server, which I put in my write-up, right? That could be used strategically if you need to take out someone's DNS infrastructure for whatever reason, right? But they weren't like remote code execution. Bind is very interesting. It's very near and dear to my heart. I was cutting my teeth in this industry 20 years ago. I was working with bind exploits.
Back when I was young.
Right, but it seems to me like there's been a series, like yearly series of bind vulnerabilities and exploit of varying severity that occur in this code base, which is, it's amazing to me, right? You define a protocol. I mean, when was the DNS RFC written? Had to be in the 70s would be my guess, right? Would be my guess. I guessed earlier that Microsoft had just over 100,000 employees. I was off. It's 182,000, right? 100,000 employees was my guess. 182,000 was the actual number. I'm saying the DNS RFC was likely written sometime in the 70s.
November 1983.
83. Okay. See, I'm off again. Right? RFC written in 1983. Here we are in 2022, and the code implementations of that RFC still have vulnerabilities. Craziness.
RFC 882. Oh my God.
I mean, I'm thinking used to be a time you'd see a bind vulnerability, and then not too much later you'd see a sendmail vulnerability.
Yes.
But I'm old.
How much sendmail is still out there?
That's a great question too. These are when we go back in history, there was a time period. I don't want to date the time period, but if you read the book about Max Butler, right, they kind of allow you to realize this, that there was a time when, as attackers, hackers, pen testers, whatever, if you wanted to break into something, it was a remote exploit. And it was at that time, Lee, that you astutely point out, right, bind and send mail were the primary targets because they're the services that were exposed through your firewall, if there was such a thing when you were doing that kind of stuff, that were exposed. And that was your way in. And then at some point in time, we cleaned up the code enough and got our firewall rules enough where we had to start going after the client, right? And like Max had done some time in prison and got out and gone, wait, everything I knew about hacking and remote exploitations kind of changed. I got to go do some phishing and go after the clients themselves. And I think now we've even extrapolated that further into going after the browsers, as we've talked about, and in basically both segments, right? Of the, not necessarily going after you're going after the user and the client, but in a slightly different way, via the browser and applications as well.
I think when we started out, we put more and more capability in the browser to make it really do really cool stuff to render pages, which happen to be useful for applications, without considering the impact on the trust model and or the subsequent hacking that was available. Because at the time it was
people
really
commit crime
cool.
on the internet.
It's a rumor. I can't confirm or deny it.
But also you got to look at web applications too. We're working on a sizzle reel that I'm calling for Hacker Heroes. And so we've recorded 6 episodes of this new show we're about to release as a sneak preview to our listeners. And Jeremiah Grossman was one of my most recent ones. And he goes, there's a great quote from that interview where he's like, I was presenting at early DEF CONs, Jeremiah was. And he's like, I was talking about hacking web applications. Like, not everyone was paying attention. He's like, but I was hacking people 6 ways to Sunday. And like back then, it didn't get as much attention because shit like SendMail and Bind was open in people's firewalls and had remote exploits. So we didn't need to go after the application, right? But he was like cross-site scripting, SQL injection. He's like, I was doing all that stuff, but people were hyper-focused on the firewalls, remote exploitation, right? And it's interesting to see the progression in our field and how things change. But also stay the same.
I love Jeremiah. He's awesome, dude.
Oh, he's awesome.
He's also one of the biggest people I've ever met in person.
He's
like the gentlest giant. He's
also
incredibly
talks
tall.
about getting his ass kicked by a woman who was twice his age when he first started training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is one of my most favorite moments in the interview I recorded with him. It's a great story.
I can't even imagine that. I went to training
story.
with him. I didn't train. I literally went to watch the training.
Yeah.
And I used to work at White Hat, which was his company.
Oh, you worked at White Hat. Okay, yeah. So he talked about that. Yeah.
Yeah, he's such a nice guy.
He is.
And I went to the training, and he's literally throwing people across the room and then picking them up, going, "Okay, let's do that again, and let me show you how to." And I'm like,
"Whoa!"
And it's just like. Whoosh.
We definitely talk about that parallels between martial arts, security, hacking kind of thing. Yeah, it's great. I'm excited.
I wanted to leave us with one last one, because it's kind of timely. Emotet, the financial malware group, is ramping up a campaign that are IRS themed, and we're coming into tax season. This is it's a good time to let everybody know to watch out for this. The IRS will never do this sort of thing. I picked it more for the time of year than whether Emotet was or was not the most feared financial crime oriented hacking group. I just think it's getting to be that time to put people on guard to watch out for phony IRS stuff.
I think it's a great point, Lee. Like, what you're expecting in your inbox, we'll limit it even to just that. Like, what you're expecting could be the unexpected, right?
Yeah.
It's like as tax season rolls around, they're preying upon the fact that you're expecting communications related to your taxes. And that's what I think when we talk about security awareness and training, that we need to focus on, that what you're expecting is likely what the bad people are going to prey upon. So have a heightened sense of awareness, whether it's tax season, whether it's vacation season, whether it's holiday season, whatever it is, like whatever you're expecting is likely fraud. in spam or phishing, right? Like that's I think a great lesson.
COVID brought out 80 some odd thousand fake URLs for COVID scams. Hurricane Katrina brought out 10,000. I mean,
because if it was Hurricane Katrina, you were expecting emails about relief help and things like that. With COVID, there was a series of things. There was stuff related to vaccines. There was stuff related to guidance. There was, a series of things that you would expect. And I agree, Josh. Like we could, actually construct, I think, some pretty good awareness training and build scenarios around basically things users would expect and how it's not what you expect. The recent one we got was United States and Canada negotiations of a Cloud Act agreement. I don't know if you guys saw this spam. You guys probably all got this particular spam message purporting to come from US DOJ. It looks very official. Might be something we're expecting. Totally phishing. Totally phishing.
Yeah, no.
Phishing. Look, what is it? 80-90% of the email on the internet is spam. A significant portion of it is just sales. Significant portion of it is phishing.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right. Expect the expected. What's the expected? It's mostly bullshit.
But I mean, they've largely pivoted too. I mean, because I think even not us as users, right, but non-cybersecurity professionals and or experts, right, we expect that we're going to get some stuff in email that's shady, right? Because if you've been just in technology in the past 20 plus years, you've probably learned that like some of the emails you get are totally spam, right? Like that's to be expected. But like a text message or Facebook message or Twitter DM, maybe your expectations are, like it's not email, so I don't expect it in that particular medium. But like totally, we can spot, some of that stuff from a mile away. And hopefully there's a heightened state of awareness on that kind of stuff. But still, people still fall for it. I mean, that's why they do it. People still fall for it.
Amen. Yeah, it happens on a regular basis. I can't tell you how much time and effort and money and everything else I've invested in. Please don't call me anymore for this spam crap because it's going to keep happening. The family tech support line goes crazy after every natural disaster. I'm sure all of you have the same issue. Is this real? Yeah. Is this bullshit? My sister started a business and got 14,000 spam emails that I had to personally disabuse her of, like entire categories of them, until finally she called me up. She goes, "This is all BS." I'm like, I know. Yeah.
My son got the iOS. I think it's specific to iPhones and iOS calendar spam, where they put appointments on your calendar, like, you've been compromised. You need to click this link to like clean up your phone, kind of thing. And thank God, like what we instill in our family had rubbed off. And he was like, "Dad, what's this?" I'm like, "You didn't click any of the links." He's like, "Hell no, I didn't click any of those links." And then, quick Google search and you figure out how to clean all those up pretty fast, right?
The calendar invites that are unsolicited from marketing people.
Yes, that's what he became. He was a victim of that. Yeah, that's a really highly annoying, right? Because it hits your notifications, the whole thing. I mean, it's a pretty brilliant kind of scam.
Yeah,
in using that medium for that, right? But
it drives me so nuts. And I actually, before I knew that was a thing, because I live and die by my calendar pretty much. It tells me go somewhere, get on this Google Meet or whatever. I'm there because that's.
Right.
I mean, my life is meetings, let's be honest. And so I get on a meeting one day and I'm like, I'm looking, I'm like, I don't recognize this meeting. All right, whatever. I get on and he goes, "I'm so glad you joined my meeting and I'd really like to talk to you about this." I'm like, "This is not a product I'm interested in." I listened to the spiel. I went, how did we meet? We never met. I just sent you a calendar invite.
But you're right. Because if you get an email, there's a calendar invite.
It's automatically on your calendar. Whether you're Google 365, doesn't matter. It's on your calendar. I'm like, whoa, wait. I dig into the calendar. I'm like, this didn't come through Calendly.
because like my Calendly link is only shared with certain people, right? I'm like, this is not, I don't recognize this person. Delete.
Yeah, no. And the trick is to decline the meeting without responding to the sender so they don't realize it got through.
Correct. Delete. Yes.
So be
I
careful
actually
if you haven't had your coffee.
It's sneaky.
Right.
They're sneaky.
I'm
Yeah.
actually in the middle of, I have two of those calendar programs, and one of them is going to be for a certain group of people, and the other one is going to be the more public one, because I'm going to block off only certain hours that the one can talk to, can book rather, because I find I have to.
Yes. Controlling the hours is important, Josh. Yeah, I learned that from Michael Sant'Arcangelo, right? How to manage, like when these were first emerged, he was using them heavily. I'm like, dude, that's really awesome. Like, how do you do that?
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, but you really got
If
to
you
manage.
if you can turn off auto accept, it's a win.
Yes, to screen them. That's a good point. But also manage your time on them as well, and have specific ones. Like you're saying, Josh, this one is public, but they can only book a certain block, right? Because like
Very
I found
narrow
like
window. Yeah, exactly.
like early in the morning meetings for me, I'm like, wait, like if my family needs to like go get breakfast, someone's not feeling good, drop the kids off at school, like I can't be rushed in the office all the time. So I'm like, whoa, wait, like my booked meeting day starts at 10 a.m., right? Now, when I book internal meetings and I'm communicating with people directly, I'm like, no. Like, we can bypass that. Like, here's the link where you can book my actual time, right? But you still got to be careful of the spam ones because they're out there.
All right.
Okay, so we're trying to come up with a name with this on the Discord. We've got calendishing, appoint mishing, and war calling.
Oh, I forget what Apple called it something. I forget what it was when I looked it up. I think they might have called it something silly like calendar spam or something like that.
No, I like war calling.
Yeah.
War calling is
So
good.
do I. Quick,
This is
trademark
hilarious.
it.
Calshing? No, Wolfie, not calshing. Gene and I went back and forth. I think I came up with war calling, but Gene had point mishing. That was not bad either.
And is it
dear
people
God.
trying to, well, I mean, some of it is people are trying to basically fish you, but other times, Josh, what you described is someone trying to sell you something.
Oh no, it's. I mean, salespeople. You haven't gotten this.
I have.
Salespeople are dropping uninvited calendar invites,
I've never gotten
your
on the
email.
call with them, yeah, but I've seen it. Yeah.
and it's really frigging annoying. It's like, you didn't clear this with me. You didn't call me. You've had no. Well, it's like LinkedIn. I mean, how many LinkedIn invites do you get
Oh my
that you're
God.
like, I don't know this person. You know, I mean, I
They're so easy
link
to
up with a lot of the
spot now,
guests on
though.
the show, for example. I'm sorry, Paul, go ahead.
I was just going to say, they're so easy to spot. When I go through my LinkedIn, I can just tell, like, automated, like, because they're, you know what it is? They're mostly talking about themselves and not me. I'm like, if you're leading in talking about yourself, delete. Right? You got to show some effort. That's how I would do some of the unsolicited stuff, is I would immediately start talking about them. Like, oh, I actually researched your company and found you and thought this about your you make it about them in your first communication, which is kind of scary how sales tactics and phishing kind of tie into each other. A successful sales campaign and a successful phishing campaign have a lot in common, right? And it's about making it about your target, not about you in your initial communication.
It's oh God, no, we're not. Oh, are we getting war calling added to set?
Yes, war calling. War calling is the thing, but it's also Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. If the one thing you get from that book is in the subject, in the first lines of your email, if you're making it about them, you're going to have way more success than making it about yourself.
Well, yeah. Look, my so this is going to sound weird, but I started this, with my business partners. I started this company. We do sales and marketing stuff for tech companies, and we have a lot user defined strategy. So we're all about the audience.
So you have a phishing company. It's a phishing company. It's phishing. Is
No,
my
no,
point.
for us,
Yeah.
we find companies that need help doing their sales and marketing.
Right.
But we do it from the premise of what do their customers need.
Exactly.
And,
Make it about
we,
the customer.
we start off most of our business calls with how can we help you?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a hugely successful strategy, and it really changes the mindset of the call.
But
We're not
frightening-
going,
no,
look
but
at
what
how
if-
awesome we are.
What if
We're going, what can
phishers? My concern is what if the phishing folks adopt that strategy? They're listening
That's
to the
a
show,
problem.
right? And they've read. This is not a secret, right? You can glean this information. Like I said, Dale Carnegie's book was one of the oldest, I think, works that talks about this. He might have even written that book before email was really as popular as it is today in a technology. I'm not even sure. When was that book written? It was a long time ago.
Dude, it was written before the internet.
Right? It was before the internet. Okay.
What?
Right. Yes. It was written before the internet, Lee, and I'm telling you, craziness. And there's lots of other works that talk about this. It's hard to weed out the works that actually help you with this. But when I was, for a certain period of time, running sales for Security Weekly, I was like, holy shit, like this is just like phishing. Like literally, like there's so many parallels here. It's kind of frightening.
It was written in 1936.
Holy shit, like way before the internet. Even before computers, right? And 36 was before Turing, before even the Polish, the Poland had their
36.
Yeah, that was
In
before.
36, computers had 2 legs and were living.
They were
Yeah, it was a
literal
job
people.
description.
It was a job
title.
description. Yes, it was people who were called computers because they were crunching numbers manually. You're right, Lee. Yep.
And they were freaking awesome.
That's
The revised edition was in 1981.
yes, a great book. I tell you what, if you're starting a business or doing phishing, I mean, to tell you what, you social engineering trying to do phishing, you should also read that book, right?
If I'm going to clarify slightly, if you're a human being that would like to be good at being a human being,
You should read
the
that book. Yeah, it's like the first book you should read. Starting a business, starting this career, or like you said, Josh, just like general good advice. It's hard to weed out all of those works to see what you should read, but that's definitely one on the list.
Oh, that's not even a question. My personal list is, how to win friends and influence people. I'm a big fan of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Oh yeah, that's a great one too. And it's not about motorcycle maintenance necessarily, right?
No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's about how to think.
Yes.
And that's one of my favorites. I read that every 2 or 3 years, and have been for the last 40 years or so.
That's a good point too. I know we're kind of rambling off topic, right? But I think there's some good advice in here. Some of these books you should go back and reread as a refresher.
Absolutely. Well,
yeah.
I'm not the same person I was when I was 20.
Yeah. No, and I feel like to consume the content, like Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference is one you got to read multiple times. Brain Audit by Sean D'Souza is one you can read multiple times. There are certain ones, and these will help you not just in business, but I think in information security as well. For sure.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, Lee, what books have you got that should be added to that list?
Yeah, let's round out some book recommendations, Lee.
I was thinking that I was back in my Covey classes thinking about 7 Habits of Effective People. Because
that's a good one.
Yeah.
That's Covey, right? Yeah, Covey.
Yes. Yeah. And he writes a great book, but he is a terrible presenter.
Yeah, sometimes that doesn't go hand in hand. My book recommendation we haven't talked about is The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. You ever read that book?
Ooh.
No, I haven't actually.
You'll actually feel bad reading that book. If you're trying to climb your way in the corporate ladder or work the political angle in your career, if you read this book, you'll feel bad, but it's amazing. It's truly amazing. Robert Greene did a great, a podcast interview, which is how I found the book. And what was amazing, it's like a different way of thinking about gaining power, which you feel I felt bad listening to the interview and thinking about how I would implement the thoughts and ideas in this book. And then in the podcast interview, which I believe was on Jordan Harbinger, which is a great podcast, by the way, Robert Greene says, my book has been banned in certain prisons in certain states. I'm like, what? He's like, my book is very popular with prison inmates, and prison inmates have written me over the years. He published it in 1998, and he says several prison inmates have written me and said, thank you for writing this book. It helped me take over my cell block in my prison. So much so that certain prisons in certain states have banned this book. It's just crazy. But the approach is very different in that he gives it's almost like a Bible, right? He gives a parable. A parable is usually a factual account from history, and then he talks about the from that factual account from history, and he marches through 48 of them. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing.
I will be getting that. Oh, in terms,
I would say read it, but also put yourself in check, morals, ethics, values when you read this as well, because that was kind of in question when I get what he was getting at, but I'm like, I don't know that I'm not that person to do. I get what you're saying, you should do that stuff if you want to gain power, but I'm like, I don't know, sketchy.
I will tell you the only other book or presentation the only other presentation I'd suggest is Start With Why by Simon Sinek. And some people don't like it. I happen to like it, but that's just my thing.
Awesome. Well, we rounded out with some book recommendations. I don't know how we got on that topic, but I'm glad we did. Some good recommendations for our listeners. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching this edition of Ball Security Weekly. Dave Kennedy coming up next, talking about Trevor C2 and C2 Communications. Stay tuned.